Good afternoon, everyone. You're all very welcome to our first Aware webinar of 2025. My name is Dr. Susan Brannick. I'm a clinical psychologist and clinical director here at Aware. I'm joined by Dr. Mark Rowe, who I will introduce more formally in just a moment. But just to allow a few moments for people to join. As people are joining, just a bit of a reminder on these webinars. So we meet the second Wednesday of every month, looking at a range of topics around mental health. You can look on YouTube for past webinars and look on our website for more information on the services that we offer in Aware. So information, education and support, you can find all the details on aware.ie, and that's for people who might be experiencing mental health problems, for those of you who aren't familiar with our services, as well as support and information for people who care about a loved one who may be experiencing depression or anxiety. So as ever for our webinar today, really encouraging everyone to ask questions as we go through. So we're happy to take questions on our topic, which, as I said, is the role of lifestyle in improving well-being. My apologies in advance if we don't get to your specific question. We'll do our best to get to all of them as much as we can. We can't always answer very direct specific queries. So if you're left with any questions after our webinar today, really encouraging you to talk to your GP. So without further ado, just to welcome Dr. Mark Rowe this afternoon. You're very welcome to the webinar today, Mark. So just as a way of a brief introduction, Mark Rowe is a family physician and founder of the Waterford Health Park. So a pioneering healthcare facility that brings together medical, wellness and community health services in a supportive, healing environment. So Mark holds nearly 30 years of experience in general practice, occupational health and lifestyle medicine. Mark's passionate about helping people take an active role in their own health and well-being, believing that lasting change comes from practical, sustainable habits. Mark lectures annually to UCD medical students on lifestyle medicine and sustainable well-being, and is regularly invited to speak to healthcare professionals across a range of fields, including the Irish College of General Practitioners, Faculty of Radiology, and the Irish Society of Rheumatology. And in your spare time, Mark, I see there that you volunteer by leading guided forest therapy sessions and host wellness retreats in Cyprus. So a huge range of interest and experience and expertise, Mark. So thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. You're very welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Susan. I'm absolutely delighted to be here. And, I really believe in purpose and service and giving back to others. And, my purpose is really encouraging and hopefully empowering others to, improve their health and well-being in small, tangible, sustainable ways that improve the quality of someone's everyday lived experience and may well improve their longer term health span as well. As you said, I've been a family doctor now for about 30 years. I don't know where the years have gone. And, I've always been interested in people, and I've had some interesting experiences along the way, some interesting challenges. If people go onto my website and watch my TED Talk, The Doctor of the Future Lifestyle as Medicine, I talk about some of those in that. But I think, there's really been an epidemic of mental health issues in the last number of years. But I first really became aware of the negative impact of toxic stress during the great financial crash, when I was seeing so many people who were really struggling with real pressure and real stress. Pressure from financial institutions, not able to pay the mortgage, people losing jobs, living in fear of a very uncertain future. And a lot of people at that time felt trapped. And, some people certainly had significant mood disorders and needed medication. And by the way, I'm a scientist, I'm a doctor, and medication can be absolutely life-saving. And I would say to anybody, that I've seen people with severe depression for whom medication has saved their lives. There's no question about that. But people, can benefit from so much more than simply medication as well. And back then, I needed new strategies to support people. And that's really when I began to look at the Stoic philosophers who really embraced these ideas of radical acceptance, reframing challenges through the lens of growth and meaning and connection, and some sort of what we would call lifestyle as medicine practices, and got to go to Harvard certifying that in the first cohort of doctors worldwide in 2017. And really, this idea of lifestyle as medicine is really habits that can support and enhance your well-being. And there's a number of these, and we can talk about them later on in our time together today, Susan.
Mm. That's great, Mark. Thank you. And I guess it's an interesting idea, isn't it? As you say, it's firstly maybe to mention as you refer to there, some medication can be life-saving for people. So it's not about an either or, is it?
No,
It's
it's the
about,
best. It's
yeah,
very much the best of both.
yeah.
And I think I see people every day with mental health challenges of all varieties. And, you know, mental health and physical health and emotional health and relationship health, they're all interconnected. As I say, you know, you can't have the physical health without mental health, and vice versa. They're all parts of the puzzle that make us all uniquely human. And we all have challenges with our mental health during life, just as we can all have challenges with our physical health at times too. So I think it's really important to understand that. But I see, you know, treating, you know, health issues, or to look at it another way, supporting someone's well-being or supporting somebody in being better to themselves, as you know, there's several pieces to it. Yes, sometimes medication can be absolutely essential. Talk therapy can be absolutely invaluable. I'm a great proponent of people getting cognitive behavioral therapy. It can be helpful in so many life situations. I'm a trained therapist, can be absolutely invaluable. And then obviously lifestyle changes as well. And of course, when somebody has a low mood, it can be very difficult for someone to feel motivated enough to actually make make those first steps in terms of improving their lifestyle. But and maybe sustainable change does start on the inside by being, maybe by choosing to be kinder to yourself, by maybe choosing to let go of that inner critic a little bit. And you know, it's about being patient, and it's about progress. And sometimes just turning up and just staying in contention is actually good enough.
Yeah, it's a beginning of bigger steps, isn't it? And I suppose it's very timely, and part of the reason that we kind of wanted to have this conversation today, as you say, there's a quite kind of practical things that people might be able to do and changes that people can make. And I suppose that it's an interesting idea, isn't it? Like lifestyle as medicine, so that it's not an additional thing, it's possibly quite front and center as well, so people can take those actions. And as you say, the maybe something we'll come back to as we go on is one of the big problems in depression is motivation, isn't it? And having the
Mm,
energy to do things that matter, or to do things that are enjoyable. So we'll, I
mm,
guess, kind of bearing that in mind as we talk. People might, as they're listening today or joining us, might be in quite different places in terms of how they're I guess feeling ready and able to make changes along that spectrum of kind of small, medium to large.
mm. And a great question maybe to ask yourself is, what's the smallest thing
Mm.
I could do today that if I were to do it could enhance my well-being? Just a teensy weensy baby step. And you know, something that can have a really beneficial impact on our mood and on our well-being and our lived experience is the environment that we spend our time in. And it's really interesting how exposure to natural light early on in the day has such a positive impact on what's called our 24-hour body clock and circadian rhythm, and impacts our melatonin levels properly, so that it can help what's called entrain a better night's sleep, or entrain a more natural sleep cycle. So getting outdoors in the morning, even if you're not up to exercising, but even just getting outdoors in the earlier part of the day can be really, really good for you. Wrap up well, of course, in this cold weather. And conversely, avoiding blue light at nighttime is really
Mm.
important, because the blue light from the screens which so many people unfortunately are now addicted to screens. The blue light, that really drives a big hole through your melatonin production. It can reduce it by as much as 50%. That's huge. And that loss of melatonin means it's harder to get to sleep. And you when you do, you're in a lighter stage of sleep. So you don't get that deep, restful, restorative recharge that sleep can give you. And then that can make you feel even more anxious and even more irritable and more stressed the next day. So that's just one simple example of getting outdoors. If you can spend time in what I call a health enhancing environment, and the two that I'd like to describe are mainly nature, because there's
And Mark,
incredible.
sorry to interrupt you just for a minute, but I guess just to go back, because I think as you mentioned, the sleep is really a key one, and it comes up a lot, doesn't it? Certainly around this time of year, and I'm sure maybe you're no different to myself in terms of the conversations I might have with people in clinic around how to reduce that usage at night time of the phone, as well as the other piece of kind of the light in the morning. What sort of conversations do you have with people, or what do people find helpful? Because we all kind of know, don't we? It's the sort of implementing it
It
and how
is.
that getting from the kind of idea to the practice is the tricky
Clo-
piece.
you're so right. I call it closing the gap
Yeah.
between what we know we should do and actually doing it. Um, so, about 11 years ago, I used to bring my phone to bed, and I thought it was a great alarm clock. And what I found was I'd get into bed, I might be looking at emails. I'd certainly be straight on to work related stuff first thing in the morning, checking maybe texts that had come in or emails or whatever. And I wasn't even present before I'd even put my feet out of the bed. And I found it was affecting my sleep. And then around that time, I began to discover the negative impacts of blue light. So I just realized something had to change. So what worked for me was I got a docking station in the kitchen. And my non-negotiable rule was I would plug my phone into my docking station at least 90 minutes, if not longer, before bed. And just so that would be screen-free time. And I found my sleep improved. And I think that's really, we need a wind down time at night. Sleep doesn't start when our head hits the pillow. Sleep is a process of recharge and unwinding that starts, at least an hour or two before actual bedtime. And it's building the habits. So, just keeping the phone out of the bedroom, I think, is a really good thing to do. It's just like if you think of a traffic light, green, orange, and red, you're in that red zone. That red zone after 9, 10 o'clock at night. That's the time when willpower is at its weakest. That's when you're least likely to make health enhancing choices. And that's really when the phone can play havoc with scrolling and all those kind of things. So I think having a wind down at night and keeping your phone downstairs, I think, I've said it to lots of patients and it's really worked for them too.
And I guess, yeah, as you say, knowing that time you're kind of
Mm,
less kind of able to resist that. So it's maybe setting things up, uh,
yeah,
putting it
it's
in place, as you say, the docking system, or maybe even getting a different alarm clock, that kind of thing. So you set
yes,
the
and
environment.
you're dead right, and that's what I did. I went and bought an old-fashioned digital alarm clock, um, battery operated, and that's what I've had ever since. And
Okay.
and it's this little idea that we are different people in different situations, and the reality is, we live in a modern world, but the way the brain is designed is the way it was thousands of years ago. The brain is primarily designed for survival and for fear detection, and that amygdala, the
Mm,
red button, as I say, in the brain, is hardwired for stress and fear and anxiety. And sort of happiness and positivity is great, but it's very much an optional extra when it comes to survival.
mm,
So, when we're tired, our willpower muscle goes down and we're just back into that kind of fight or flight state. So we really want to get into recharge. We want to get into unwind. We want to get into that pause or plan, what's called parasympathetic nervous system, to
mm,
unwind. And that's the other thing about the phones at night is it's not just the blue light. It's actually if your brain stays wired, doesn't get to unplug, as it were. You're still reading stuff. So we need to give our brain what I call a brain break at night to really just get back to the way it was thousands of years ago, get back to the more natural state.
Mm. And I guess maybe tolerating that might be difficult in the beginning. It might be boring. There might be a desire for more stimulation, but that settles, I think, over time, doesn't it?
It's never easy to break or build a new habit, and I wouldn't like
Mm.
to pretend to anyone
Yeah.
listening that it is or can be, but it's
Mm.
so worthwhile. And of course, like all these things, we need to try them out and see if they work for us, and become the author of your own experiment, as it were, when it comes to your own well-being and your own lived experience.
Yeah.
But generally, in terms of building a new habit or breaking an old habit, if you can replace it with something
Mm.
else that's enjoyable, it sort of makes it much more palatable. Getting back into the habit maybe of reading. There's so
Mm.
many great books out there, whether it's you know whatever you're interested in, really. But just
Mm.
reading at night can be a great thing. If you're fortunate enough to have a bath can be a great way to unwind and
Mm.
unplug. Yoga Nidra is an incredibly uh, beneficial activity for so many people. They think that yoga nidra for 25 minutes equates to maybe about 3 hours of sleep. You can
Mm.
Google it on YouTube. It's incredibly restorative. It's so easy to do. You literally just lie down, or you can do it in bed with your eyes closed. Yoga nidra it's really getting into that deep recharge, that deep unplug. Um, writing in a journal. I find writing in a journal, not for everyone, but for many people, find it really
Mm.
helpful. And writing at night, I call it WWW, Susan, what went well.
Okay.
And it's a
Mm.
great little habit at bedtime. Think of three things that went well during your day. It could be
Mm.
really little incidental things. But what that does, it moves. You see, the majority of our brain or our mind is under the water, like an iceberg. They say perhaps 95% or so. So, but our subconscious mind plugs into relaxation, plugs
Mm.
into, um, you know, what's going well. It moves away from that stressed fight or flight state, and that can improve your sleep. In fact, research has shown it can significantly improve sleep quality and allow you to naturally unwind.
Mm.
So, that can be very helpful for some people as well.
Mm.
And or
It
maybe you might
really-
use that time at night, instead of scrolling on your phone, to actually phone a friend and
Mm.
have a real life conversation with somebody. Because right now there are so many of us that are experiencing loneliness for all sorts of reasons, and loneliness can be very detrimental for our well-being and for our mental health.
Mm.
And
Absolutely.
we thrive based on human connection. So having
Mm.
somebody to listen to us, and that we can support as well. Reaching
Mm.
out to somebody who might be struggling right now, it can be a great gift to do that.
Yeah.
And or maybe watch a bit of, watching TV, that's not the same really as the phone, in terms of the like watching some comedy or watching something light-hearted,
Mm.
you know,
I guess the
making
phones.
yourself laugh.
Yeah, yeah, it's crucial, isn't
Having,
it? I suppose the
yeah,
phone maybe offers the kind of veneer of connection.
yes,
But doesn't offer, as you say, maybe there's such a huge difference, isn't there, between scrolling versus phoning someone and actually having a
yeah,
conversation. So that's maybe a key thing to consider. And I
yeah.
suppose just as you talk, maybe I'm just thinking a lot about values as well. So I
Mm,
suppose the kind of what might support someone's motivation to do this. Um, Maybe it's about kind of tuning into what's important to them. I know you kind of talk about the future self, so we'll come to that. But I suppose it's this idea, isn't it, that in terms of your own values, what is it that matters to you? So yeah, why would I bother going to go and buy this separate alarm clock? Why do I put the phone in the docking system or read a book? It's what's the underlying kind of value of that for me? It's because I want to be able to get up the next day and kind of show up, connect with people, do work well. So I guess it's kind of tying it to that kind of underlying value, perhaps, and that can support motivation for change. And as you say, kind of building new habits. So enjoyable things, but also things that are meaningful to people individually, isn't it? And that will be different for different people.
absolutely. I always say, with any positive change in your life, start with why. Start on the inside. start with, why is this important for me? What value does it connect with? You're so right, Susan. Choosing to connect with your values, it's a powerful way to boost feelings of resilience
Mm,
and positive mental health. And certainly there's research from Stanford University that shows that it's a very good exercise to support more positive mental health, build resilience, and make it easier to build new health enhancing habits. Simply writing about one of your values, and there's so many values, whether you value kindness or gratitude or wisdom or health or fairness or justice. And there's so many you can Google. There's a long list of them. But if you pick a value that just means a lot to you today and spend 10 minutes writing about it,
mm,
um, that one 10-minute exercise can lead to a longer, much longer term improvement in your resilience and well-being, because it's really connecting with who you are when
mm,
everything's stripped away, who you are on the inside.
mm,
And if you can connect any, you're so right, if you can connect any potential positive change in your life to the value that it connects with, it's much more meaningful for you in terms of moving the dial. So, in terms of the phone, well, if you say, well, I value my health, and connect that to health, it becomes an easier thing to do.
mm.
Um,
Yeah. And I just see a question there, Mark, as we're on the topic of sleep. We could probably do the whole webinar on sleep alone, but we won't. But someone's kind of put in there kind of how long before bed to avoid the blue light, which I think you mentioned, but maybe just to say it again. And someone else has asked about reading books on the phone.
Well, the problem so I would say, you should try and have a wind down time at night. Everybody's different, but I would say at least 60 minutes and ideally longer before bedtime, to get off the phone. Um, and give it a couple of months and see what happens.
Mm,
I mean, in terms of reading a book on the phone, the problem is you're still on the phone reading the book. Reading is great, but you're still exposed to the blue light, so that's the issue. Um, so I think you're much better off buying what we call a real book. It
mm,
used to be just a book, but now we'd have to say a real book, and reading that. Um, and personally, I love to read. I love to read poetry. I
mm,
find poetry is very soulful. Poetry really, uh, you know, T.S. Eliot spoke about poetic emotion, nearly 100 years ago. But there's a resonant quality to the words in poetry that sort of nearly transcends normal conversation. And
mm,
I love to read the poetry of Rumi and the poetry of
mm,
Hafiz, who were Sufi mystics at night. And I have a couple of their books beside my bed that I'll often just flick in and out of.
mm,
It's very random. It's very non sort of progressive or non-linear, but it's just
mm,
something I enjoy doing. So we're all different. We're all unique. If we're all the same, wouldn't life be so boring? So I'm
yeah,
just saying, find something that works for you.
yeah,
Be kinder to yourself.
mm,
Value your health. It's such a priceless asset. And I can tell you, it can be tragically far too short for far too many people. So value your health. I'm not into this idea of new year, new you, and sort of self-flagellating with a long list of must-dos and
mm,
should-dos. No, start with being kinder to yourself and being kinder to those people around you.
mm.
And by doing that, you're taking a positive step forward into more of the person that you're really meant to be.
Yeah. And change is easier. We actually through a more self-compassionate approach. We tend to change less, don't we, through the self-flagellation and the punishing, even though it tends to be the go-to for many people
Mm.
and culturally, but actually, as you say, that it tends to be a slightly more sustainable path to behavior change.
And just for your listeners who might
Mm,
not totally understand what self-compassion is,
mm,
Susan, it's really this idea of appreciating that you are a unique, beautiful human being, that you are flawed and you are imperfect, just like everybody else, but you too are deserving to be loved, and you are deserving of kindness, and you are deserving to treat yourself just as you would treat your best friend. I mean, if your best friend came to see you, Susan, and was struggling, was really worried about something, you would sit down, you maybe have a cup of coffee with your friend, listen, offer unconditional support and kindness, and self-compassion is, treat yourself the same way as you would as your best friend, with the same empathy, kindness, and support.
Yeah.
And in a world out there that can be very, very harsh
Mhm.
and very, very judgmental, and there's a lot of toxic stress and a lot of noise out there, choosing to be a little bit kinder to yourself, I think, is really the starting point for
Mhm.
any lasting change in the
And
world.
growth as well, I think, isn't it, Mark? I guess that the self-compassion piece is absolutely that, isn't it? But it's also
Totally.
having that bravery and courage to bring that compassion to the more difficult parts of ourselves that might feel harder to see or to recognize. And I guess that's where self-compassion really kind of comes into its own. It allows a space actually to look at those more challenging parts and to make changes really and bring that kindness to that. So I suppose it's kind of holding yourself accountable as well without the punishment piece. So
Mm.
it's really kind of key for behavior change.
And
And like,
sometimes that requires courage,
yeah.
because the default is to keep on doing what you've always done.
Mm.
And it can take tremendous courage
Yeah.
to choose to look at things a little bit differently. But it can be so incredibly worthwhile.
Mhm. Um, or just as a plug to previous webinars, we had one on self-compassion for anyone who this might resonate with. So have a look at our YouTube channel from last year, if that is of interest. So Mark and I had kind of interrupted you a little bit before. You were going to talk a bit more about nature, weren't you, and environment? I wonder
Mm.
if we might move on to that a little bit.
Yeah, it's really, so many people in the world now are suffering from what I would call indooritis. And indooritis is a term I made up, that we're spending so much of our time indoors where we're not exposed to natural light. And the counterbalance for that is to get out in nature. And it was fascinating research done by a Japanese doctor called King Lee, and he took Japanese businessmen into the woods for 45 minutes, and he found that their blood pressure came down, their stress hormone levels, cortisol came down by 12%. Um, but more importantly, perhaps, they felt less tired and they felt more invigorated and they had more vitality. And that was the beginning of this fascinating idea known as forest therapy, which really means getting out and connecting with the natural world. And we can do that in so many ways. We can actually go out and walk in the woods. Um, but simply getting out in your garden and looking very carefully at a plant, walking in a local park. There are so many ways to connect with the natural world. And it turns out it's incredibly good for us in so many ways. It is brilliant for promoting more positive mental health, because it's a great way to dampen feelings of stress. It quietens the subgenual prefrontal cortex, which is an area of the brain that deals with the inner critic. So, walking in nature makes you nicer to others and also nicer and more compassionate to yourself. It boosts your mood, it boosts memory, it boosts motivation, it boosts creativity. You're twice as likely to have creative ideas after a walk in nature than sitting at your desk indoors. It's incredibly good for our physical health, and it's very restorative. Now, there was interesting research from Exeter that showed that if you could spend 2 hours in nature over the entire week, including the weekend, that was kind of a dose that would definitely improve your well-being. But that mightn't be achievable for many people. But even micro doses of nature, I think, are great ways to break the toxic grip that stress hormones can have on us. In
Mm.
fact, even having a screensaver of nature on your computer can dampen the stress response. Having a plant, I call that vitamin P, um, that you have to water and care for. That nurtures
Mm.
the release of oxytocin, which is that hormone of connection,
Yeah.
and it can be really, really quite simple thing to do to build that sense of caring that's really innate to all of us. So spending time in nature, and there's so many reasons for it. There's the fractal patterns, they're the beautiful designs of the branches and the trees and the plants. There's the soundscapes of nature. I mean, birdsong can be incredibly good for us. Listening
Mm.
to the birds sing, I find it so incredibly relaxing. And there's research showing that just listening to the birds singing for about 10 minutes immediately makes us feel more calm and relaxed and zen-like. It's something about that stochastic nature of birdsong, the randomness of it that's really, really, really beautiful.
Mm.
Um, if you ever have seen the light through the trees, Susan, like the
Mm.
speckled dapple light, where you see the sun shining
Mm.
through leaves, the Japanese call that komarebi, and it's really kind of the essence of forest therapy. It's that
Mm.
beautiful experience of you're seeing the sunlight through the leaves, you're experiencing the kind of oneness and broader connection of the natural world. And it's a great way to allow you to move from, I suppose, the distracted merry-go-mind of doing and busyness and distress, and back to being, back to just being present. And it
Mm.
instills what's called the small self effect, which is that the small self effect is a really interesting concept, that when we're in nature, we appreciate how small we are
Mm.
compared to the vastness of the natural world around us. And that inspires a very strong positive emotion known as awe, AWE, and feeling moments of awe is incredibly good for our well-being as well. So,
Mm.
spending time in nature is really, I think, so incredibly good for us, and there's so much science backing up the health benefits, physical health and mental health benefits. So it's something I would encourage anybody listening to
Mm.
try and see the
Yeah.
benefits for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, there's different kind of ways to do that, whether it's a plant, whether it's the screensaver on the laptop, or it's the as ideally the optimum kind of getting out maybe for the 2 hours a week. But and I think a question came in there, or a reflection maybe, that not everyone's environment holds a
Mm,
lot of green spaces. So people are
no,
in different situations, aren't they? And I think maybe as you're talking, it really resonates with kind of two ideas in my mind of kind of, it's a real back to basics, isn't it? This doesn't need a lot of money or
no.
big dramatic kind of actions. It's as the point you made earlier as well. It's kind of, what's the smallest step you can
Mm,
take? Where's the most accessible bit of green space in this example that you can get to, whether it is a park or whether it's something different, but it's kind of making those smaller changes,
yeah,
isn't it?
not everyone has access to green space. I'm
Yeah,
aware of that,
yeah,
absolutely. But everybody could have a little indoor plant.
yeah.
And so it's about starting small.
Mm.
And I'm a great believer in let's take away the barriers. There's always reasons why
Mm.
we can decide we can't do this or we can't do that.
Mm.
But let's flip it around and say, well, what's the smallest thing I could do? And when small things change, everything changes, in the sense that you're now on a slightly different path and trajectory. And I suppose in the end of the day, it all starts with awareness, becoming more aware of the fact that everything in your space, in your environment, in your relationships, in your habits, everything is impacting us in in some way or other in terms of our health and our well-being. And nothing and no one and no environment is ever perfect. And
Mm.
it's how can we make some small tweaks to make things a little bit better?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a question that's kind of come in there that we might move to some of the questions, just thinking about our
Sure.
time together today. And thank you for the comments, everyone, as we're going through. There's definitely, having a dog is great. Certainly having that kind of external motivation, maybe to get out every day, whether whether you might choose to or not. And gardening is another option.
Mm,
Um, and I guess there's
absolutely.
an interesting question here, which I think probably we could talk about this again, maybe another whole webinar itself, but I'll read it out because I think it probably is the crux of a lot of the kind of underpinning stuff that we might kind of talk about at this time of year. So the question is, why do we continue to make unhelpful lifestyle choices that generate such stress and mental anguish? And the evidence clearly shows that relationships, service, and purpose are more likely to deliver fulfillment and well-being. Um,
It's
big
a great
question. Yeah, and a great
it's a
question.
great
It's universal.
observation.
Yeah,
In fact, Viv Murty, he's the U.S. Surgeon General, has
they've
just
cited that. Yeah.
yeah, he just spoke about, that lasting fulfillment comes from three things, which really are service, relationships, and purpose. And there's no doubt that, how we can help others in the world is really fantastic, to become less self-centered and more other-centered. That it's not about me or you, it's all of us together. And how can we connect more, build more community?
Mm,
How can we maybe volunteer in big ways, or even just teensy weensy ways to help others?
mm,
How can we build relationships? As I mentioned already, in a world where there's so much loneliness,
mm,
relationships are the leading indicator of our well-being. And, having a sense of purpose, it really massively drives fulfillment. But you're so
mm,
right. I suppose, I don't know, the world has really speeded up. And
mm,
I suppose, I think mainstream media is now competing with social media for sensationalism and um, for constant fear-driven stories. And of
mm,
course, our brains are hardwired for fear and survival. And it seems like there's a constant doom loop on the media. It's always, the news is always the really bad news.
yeah.
And I think actually choosing, as I often do, to put on some music in the car,
Mm,
because the car is an interesting environment. If you have a car, that is, or even if you're going on public transport, it's an interesting environment. What are you choosing to listen to? Because our
mm,
brains are like sponges; they're constantly soaking up our exposures. So what are you listening to? And nothing happens in isolation. So choosing
mm,
to listen to relaxing music, or something, or even just great music. I mean, music kind of, it's like fuel for the soul at times, isn't it? Music, I love music.
mm,
Can be so much more enjoyable and joy enhancing than listening to someone grinding on the radio about
mm.
some latest crisis or problem.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting, isn't it, as you say, that idea of sort of service and community. And in going back to that question, just an observation, maybe that again, the pathway to that, because that kind of person, the person who's made that asked that question about why do we keep making choices that kind of maybe aren't in our best interest. I do wonder if there's something about community that might support more healthy choices. There's a lot of kind of DIY sort of element to this, isn't there? But actually things are a
Mm,
little bit easier when when there's a community or connection around things. And I guess maybe that goes back to accountability as well, though. As you say, the
absolutely.
loneliness piece, we're not on our own here. We can feel very
Oh,
lonely at times, but there's a wider purpose or meaning, isn't there, if you're in a community, a group,
totally. Find your
tribe.
tribe, as they
Yeah,
say. Join a
yeah,
class, or if you can join a group. It's why I'm such a fan of suggesting different classes
yeah.
and things like yoga to people. If you take yoga as an example, it is it's very gentle physical exercise, and even for
Mm,
people that have really bad hip or back or neck problems, there's now chair yoga where you can even sit in the chair.
mm,
But it's also quite mindful. And there's research showing it lowers stress hormone levels, it boosts serotonin and endorphins, and also enhances GABA, which is a brain chemical that puts a brake on and dampens feelings of anxiety. But of course, by going to a yoga class, you also get that social connection. So I think thinking about how we can layer habits together and how we can build more social
mm,
connection, support more positive mental health, and enhance our physical health all at the same time is great if you can do that.
mm. Absolutely. Mark, I wonder maybe kind of if we might take a pause at this point, as this kind of coming to 40 minutes in, and maybe if we might do your exercise just as a way again to kind of maybe connect with the parasympathetic nervous system. We've done a fair bit of talking. Um,
Yeah, so as I said, Susan, I've written a new book called Things Your Future Self Will Thank You For, and it's really about those small sustainable changes that, future you looking into the future will be grateful that you had the courage to start. And we mentioned already, maybe starting on the inside with kindness and self-compassion. But what's really interesting about future you is, future you is emerging and emergent in each moment. And so, our future is now beyond when we started the webinar half an hour ago. So what I'm saying is in every moment our future is happening, as it were. We're moving from the present into the future. And I suppose one of the best ways to improve your future self is to improve your present moment, because that present moment is moving into the future, as it were. And so I developed this 1 minute exercise called pause. And I want to do it for all of you listeners now. And I'm putting it on my website where you'll be able to download it free as a take home gift from me. And it's really a great circuit breaker on stress. People find it very, very helpful. And it's simply choosing to build present moment awareness through the breath, which dampens the stress response, grounds you in presence, and people find it a very effective circuit breaker on stress. And the lovely thing about it is it's something that really only takes 1 minute, and you can do it anywhere, anytime, any place. Just if you're driving the car doing pause, please leave your eyes open, because that's my disclaimer. But apart from that, you can do it anywhere, anytime. And it's so easy, and no equipment or cost is needed. Only 1 minute of your time and awareness. So let's do it together now, Susan. We're just going to simply just sit in a relaxed position. We're going to close our eyes, and we're just going to focus on the breath. As we inhale through our nose and exhale through our mouth. As I breathe in courage, I breathe out fear. As I breathe in calm, I breathe out anxiety. As I breathe in peace, I breathe out anger. As I breathe in self-care, I breathe out self-neglect. And as I breathe in serenity, I breathe out stress. The lovely thing about pause, it's so easy to do. You can do it anywhere, anytime. And I encourage people to do it often. In a world where there's so much craziness, so much confusion, so many crises, um, recommitting every day to be more mindful and to value your health and to value your space, particularly the inner space, can be a real gift to you and to everyone around you.
That's lovely, Mark. Thank you so much. And maybe lovely words to end on. It's been a really, really interesting conversation today. A bit of an overview, but I think maybe the core nuggets, as we say, kind of maybe that pause is really key, something we'd really advocate in mindfulness practice as well. Just stopping, pausing, however that might work for you. And making those small steps that connect with what's important to you, what your values are, for the benefit of the present, but also into the future. So, Marky, thank you so much. We really appreciate your expertise and your time today. I'm sure it's been of great value to everyone listening.
Thank you so much, Susan. It's an absolute privilege.
You're very welcome. Thank you. And just as a note to our viewers, just before we kind of finish up today, thank you all for joining us. My apologies if we didn't get to your specific question. Hopefully we got to as many of them as possible. We just to let you know, we're opening our CBT informed education programs this week. So do have a look on our website, aware.ie. So they're cognitive behavioral therapy informed programs for managing depression, anxiety, as well as our relatives and friends programs and our bipolar program. So do have a look if any of those are of interest to you. And moving on to our webinar then for next month, we're going to be talking about depression and ADHD. So a really kind of timely topic. Hopefully it'll be of interest to many viewers. That's on the 12th of February at 12 o'clock as per usual. So thanks again everyone for joining us. Hopefully you're not too cold wherever you are. Thanks again to Mark, really great discussion, and I look forward to seeing many of you again next February. Thank you.